Blessings and welcome to this episode, Prophecy for the Last Hour. Liz McGee. I have a teaching today that I'm going to do, and it dawned on me that I should have done this a long time ago, but maybe this is the perfect time because I do have a lot more understanding of my subject matter. I'm going to do a thorough fleshing out teaching on the concept of PaRDeS, which I talk about a lot. I say this is the style of biblical exegesis that I adhere to. So I'm going to totally flesh it out, try to make it understandable for everyone. Okay, so what is it, PaRDeS? All right, so let me just give a couple definitions. Let me equate it to it is definitely a Hebraic, I've said this method of biblical exegesis, but it has its counterparts within the Christian world and different. I'll explain that also. But let's just start. PaRDeS is a mnemonic, and a mnemonic is it's a memory device. It's a lot of ways we do this, where you string the first letter of every word together, so for easy remembrance. So PaRDeS is the acronym. It's an acronym for Pshat, Remez, Drash, and Sod. Those are the levels of understanding. All right. So that's what it is. It's a mnemonic and it's an acronym for a Hebraic style of biblical research. Now, its counterparts you can find in, like the Christians would call this, a fourfold allegorical scheme. So it is very much known in Christian exegesis. It is also in the Quran. The Quran, they also have this. It is known that before the schism, especially of Sunni and Shia, it in similar fashion, the Quran has 4 levels of interpretation. Of course, every time this is part of our problem, we split. So the interpretations, the core understandings get more fragmented, but be that as it may. The Catechism of the Catholic Church defines they would call it the 4 senses of Scripture that we should use to read and interpret the Bible. They call it, there's a literal sense, an allegorical sense, a moral sense, and an anagogical sense. Now the word, anagogical, means a mystical or spiritual interpretation. All right. So to establish right off the bat, this is nothing I'm making up. This is an established way, but it's something that I feel most people, sometimes I feel like I speak with, it's like falling on deaf ears, the dialogue of the deaf. People don't get it. And then a lot of teachers, a lot of people, they're all over the place. Well, it's spiritual, it's allegorical, witches, or what, in the Bible's just myths and fables because it has some deep allegorical things. So, but let's just put that all to rest. Let's say, and what I want to do is, again, start this from a certain presupposition that if you're not kind of with me on this, I don't know what to tell you, because I believe that there is really a line is being drawn in the sand. I meant that to really get to the truth, you have to make peace. Yeshua is our peace with our older brother Judah. You have to realize to them were given the oracles and the writings, and that is why I use PaRDeS. It is Hebraic. Their level of understanding how these levels are used and interpreted is so far beyond anything that most Christian minds that I have seen can even begin to comprehend. All right. This is what I think is so important today. If you still have some amounts of anti-Semitism to you, if you still believe, well, let me just stop there. I'm going to try to always finish my thoughts. But before I get ahead of myself, I want to illustrate my point. I'm going to read something that I, in researching this, found from, now this is from a Christian, albeit a Christian messianic site, okay? And this is what they have to say. They were big proponents that the fourfold, see, if you're into replacement theology, you think that the Christians, as a Christian, you have the upper hand on all wisdom, understanding, the promises, the covenants, everything. You have replaced Israel. All right, that is the bottom, and that is the attitude of a lot of Christians. All right, we support Israel, we support, quote unquote, the Jews over there, but we don't. Christians today, unless you truly understand the two houses biblically and how the prophets speak and what the reality is, whether you know it or not, what's true is true, whether, a rose is still a rose, even if you call it something else, that they still feel there's a certain smug superiority, that they feel they know how to tell Judah how to interpret her scriptures. And the flip side is true. Let's just make this, Judah is extremely elitist on how they view the Christians' understandings of text. So both houses have like this, finger pointing going on. But I really am all about, let's quit pointing the finger. We got to get this together. We are called, if you're living today and you're listening to me and you're at the level of understanding some of the things that I am saying and others like me, then you've got to be part of the elect, and we have a job to do. And our job is to work with the Ruach towards the reconciliation of the two houses, not working against. All right? So let me read this, which I found on this Christian site when I was looking for their understanding of the fourfold sense of Scripture from a Christian POV. And I'm going to quote, "A later method of interpretation, but nearly identical to quadria," and I'm going to explain that word in a second, "is the PaRDeS method, which was first published in the Zohar. The Zohar is a pseudographical work which purports to be a commentary on the Pentateuch. It was written by Moshe de Leon, a Spanish rabbi living in the 13th century. It is a product of synchronism, a combination of different, often contradictory religious beliefs. The Zohar can be best characterized as a mystery Babylon blend of various Jewish, Christian, Hellenistic, and Gnostic religious beliefs." If that's where you are, I can't help you. The Ruach cannot talk to you. There's a blindness, there's a hardness of heart, and there is an anti-Semitism in this, because there's no understanding of Judah's birthright, which is their birthright. I mean, I don't even do this. This is coming where, and I've been to this in my last video, and a couple, the writings, the covenants, the temple services, all these things are the domain, the province of Judah, not the latter-day Christian church who was so far from Torah. All right. So if you think, and then in the Kabbalah is really and truly the Sud level of understanding. So if you don't buy into that, if you don't believe that, then just, then probably what I have to say is not going to make any difference. But you should listen, because a sound argument can help sway, a critical argument can help sway people. But then let me go to the next sentence, or the paragraph. "The Zohar clearly borrowed the quadria method of interpretation from early Christianity and reformulated it by giving it Hebrew names. That being said, the PaRDeS is popular with the Hebrew roots Messianic community, and since it's derived from the quadria, it's not problematic. That is used so long as it is used as a messianic Jewish Christians. So long as Messianic Jewish Christians don't confuse the validity of PaRDeS with an endorsement of Mystery Babylon work known as Zohar, or Jewish apostasy, that springs from Zohar and Kabbalah." Now, again, there are a lot of popular YouTube teachers out there, a lot of people, and I am one voice, there are a few voices that, It's not true, people. This is where spin and the enemy is constantly trying to thwart the reunification that is prophesied to happen, and trying to keep Christians, trying to keep people in their separate, pens, so to speak, like sheep in a pen, fences, and not merging together and learning. There could be nothing farther from the truth. Like I told you in the parable of the prodigal son, Judah is the older brother. Judah always stayed in the house with the father. That's what the father said, and you give this its in its allegorical meaning that the father represents Yahweh. All right, and he said to the other, "You've always been with me. Everything that I have is yours." Implicit is the truth, the inherent understanding of the truth of the scriptures, especially as handed down to Moshe and to the prophets. I mean, it's a no-brainer. So to be anti-Semitic is to continue to say that the Kabbalah is a work of Babylon, that the Kabbalah is all these things, just because there is a lack of understanding. I'm telling you what, and my life, I have fallen into this so many times. I label things something wrong because I don't understand. And then later I'm going, oh my gosh, how could I have said that about that person? Or how could I have thought that? I go back and look at some of my early Christian understandings. I'm thinking, how did I think that? Well, because I was taught that. Be somebody I respected or whatever, my teachers, whatever, told me that's the way it is. Well, get out of that. Grow up. Become Berean. Read the works yourself. Don't rely on what people say. Don't believe a word I say. Go and read all of the texts and make your own decisions. Then you can stand approved before Yahweh, because he will give lenience to a person who is at least humble and honest versus somebody who, all right, I'm not going to preach. Stop. All right, but the Hebrews, this is my second presupposition. If you still think that of Greek supremacy, that the Greeks, and that a lot of the New Testament, like Pauline literature, or like Philo was a Hellenite, you don't understand that the Greeks were the disciples of the Hebrews. Everything that we have, all the philosophical understandings, as much as has remained pure within Greek understandings, Greek philosophy, is from the Hebraic understanding. In other words, the Hebrews had the first understanding. All right, the Greeks were students of, and that is historically, by honest chronologers, and I have done some YouTubes on this, is proven. And this is also, though, the reason we're in this today is because this is part of the curses that would come on Israel when they became so disobedient that they were pretty worthless to Yahweh. And he, in the dispersion between the first house, or the northern kingdom, and the second, the house of Judah, in their exile, especially starting in 70 AD, they would be the tail and not the head. And I've said this, they're intellectual, they would not get credit on the world scene among the nations for their intellectual property. It would get stolen, it would get profaned, it would get repackaged, everything that we see today. So I'm kind of done. That's my little rant. But we're going to go back into PaRDeS now, and I'm going to unflush it from its true Hebraic understanding and the depth of it. And I think it's going to surprise you, but well, okay, let me just read a quick quote here from the Ramchal, who was a famous rabbi, sage in the Middle Ages, and he said, I don't want to give too much history, and I do have a lot of YouTubes on this, the parabolic language and different things. But about these things, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said, this secret has been handed, all right? This meaning the deeper levels of understanding, because truly most Christians really understand only a Peshat level, and at a very, talk about anybody being Hellenized and Gentile in their understanding. It really is most Christians today, and I'll show you that in a second. But this secret has been handed not to those who travel to distant borders, right? And there's a foot, and it says in here, for they, meaning Gentile researchers. all right, who think that they can tell Judah their history. This is what I just was did YouTube about the Temple Mount. You know, there are Gentile, you know, Messianic, I mean, Israel-loving groups out there, and they want to tell Judah that she doesn't know where she put her temple. And I'm like, how does that? It's the height of arrogance, all right? So these Gentile researchers perceive only the external features, but of the internal nature, which is the main one, they know nothing. See, one of the reasons we're made fun of in the world, so to speak, is because we treat the scriptures on their Peshat level for the most part, and we can't flush them out for people to understand on their deeper level. So we have no answer to give people about a lot of the symbolic, allegorical, and deeper mysteries that are there. And this is going to change. This is changing. And I say, be part of the change. So it is. Here's a perfect example from the same website. Their fourfold Christian interpretation, taking a concept and giving it its 4 levels of meaning. So, crossing of the Red Sea. It was literal because Moses and Israel actually crossed it. Okay, that can be an understanding historically from the text. It was spiritual because it represents our baptism and new life. This is the concept of you cross over from death unto life, and that's kind of the symbolism that's wrapped up in baptism in a mikvah. All right. It was moral because we cross over life's difficulties into our personal earthly blessings. So in other words, you know, our Egypt, our bondage, our hard seasons, our hard places. When you persevere and you do things Yahweh's way, you will pass over into earthly blessings. You will come out of bondage and into a blessing. In the 4th level, the Sod level, was eschatologically because it's eschatological because we can look forward to the final crossing over from death to eternal life in heaven. That is probably one of the most basic understandings, and there is so much, this is the point, more depth in these words to the point we're going to get to how a prophet. So this is, if you want to think that you have a prophetic call on your life, or you don't want to be a prophet or want to listen to, if they cannot give you, so let's hold this one and let's start to explain to you PaRDeS from a Hebraic point of view, getting all the way into the level that a prophet would have. Okay? So let me do this too, because there was a word that was used called quadria. And this gets into my point, that if you're going to keep giving the nations, the Gentiles, the Goys, or let's say the unbelievers, your inheritance, or let them define your inheritance for you, instead of understanding that your Hebrew roots are perfectly adequate and were there first and have the truest understanding. So we're going to get through this. I'm going to show you what a quadria is, all right? Because this is a word probably aware of. Quadria means four, dria. It talks about the symbol of a chariot drawn by 4 horses. Now let me show you this. All right, here's one. This is a picture of a quadria. All right, okay. See how and this is the concept that is about, I said, a horse and his rider. All right, which has an established. See, this is my primary. These understandings are already established in Hebrew understanding amongst the sages and the prophets. So here you have a horses and rider. All right, this is from a Lucian fresco from 400 BC. And Lucian was it was sort of an empire that spanned, like the seafaring coastlines of Greece and Italy, and this one was found in Lower Italy, in a city in Lower Italy, 400 BC. All right, this one is from a bas relief from the 2nd century AD. This is Apollo and the 4 horsemen. All right, this is because, let me just tell you, this quadria represents, it says, the chariot of the gods. All right, so you have the rider, quote unquote, the god, and the horses. All right, which I'll flesh out in 1 second. But then I have this last one. This has been around. All right, so this last one is from the 18th century. This is where it's so important. Okay, here we have, and there's an angel. This one's an angel, an angelic Elohim. This has the 4 horses, but look at the emblem at top. Look at this, these wings, and look at that cross in there. See, this is full of remez. We'll get to that, the hints, all right, and I'll get to that. But what I want, and this is 18th century, this was from Prussia. I think this Frederick the Great had this done. This was just prior to, in Germany, way before World War I, before those empires all switched around. So what I have to tell you is the quadria is nothing new. It has been around. It is not going anywhere, and we need to understand what it is. And it relates to, so now let me just say, this is ancient Hebrew. This concept originated, we'll start with even the prophet Zechariah, when he is talking about the horses of what now called the apocalypse, because the Revelator John and the prophet Zechariah use this imagery, and it is more ancient than 400 BC, and it is this concept, and I can't get into this, but see, if you had a Hebraic concept and you understood as the ancients did, oh boy, I don't want to get too much into this, how it is representing on different levels. The horse and the rider, which I told you is an idiom, Hebraic idiom for the horses represent the armies. The rider represents the one at the helm who has the reins and can make those horses move in any direction. This is alluded to as a concept of talking about the king and his armies. So a king has huge resources, military might, resources at his disposal. So the horse and the rider is the king and his armies. But ultimately, spiritually, which the Hebrew would know, which the Greeks and the others have profaned by saying it's Apollo and his armies. Let's say Apollo the god and his armies. It is Yahweh and his angels. Ultimately, this is what is being represented here. Yahweh, Lord Adonai Sabaoth, the Lord of the armies. This is Yahweh and his angels at his disposal. This is what is in this quadria. And in my last point on this, I have to say, is that John is using it in terms of the seals that have been placed on much of the word of Elohim. We live in a time where knowledge shall increase and every hidden thing is coming out. What a lot of is being conveyed through this imagery, and there's a lot of it because there's the horses, there's the colors, there's a lot of other words that give you more information. This information was sealed. Daniel was told in Daniel 12:9 through 10, it says, seal up these words until the time of the end. We're living in a time where it is available for those who wanted to do the work, to be part of the process of unsealing a lot of this deep spiritual knowledge and understanding. And technically, it's endless. Yahweh is his word reverberates through everything endlessly. There's probably no end to it. But for intents and purposes, for the purposes of classification, simplification, transmission of understanding, you know, the Hebrews, the sages put it down into basically 4 categories, all right? And again, we know this like from the 10 Commandments. Just because there's 10 Commandments, this is what much of the Tanakh is about, is within it are many nuanced levels of sin. Let's just take the category of sexual sin. Well, there's a lot of different kinds of sexual sin, you know, and we wouldn't be so confused today if we would just stick with our, even the Peshat literal, you know, understandings. So what we have to understand is that even though there is just, this is a neat little category of 4, technically the sages will tell you there's 5. There is a 5th level, which is called the Sud of the Sud, all right? So there is the secret of secrets, which is totally the domain. And seriously, I mean, because a lot of them don't teach it at this level, because this is for such, you know, Moshe and Yeshua. I mean, people who just, you know, I doubt you, or I would never put myself in that place of getting to the Sud of the Sud, or at least not anytime soon. But let's just stick with our 4, all right? So the Peshat level is literal in the sense. Now I got to qualify that, all right? Because in it's 4, all right? And this is a lot of the understanding that is coming out. People are understanding today who are doing a lot of this research. It's for babies. It's called the milk of the word. It is for the profane and the holy. I mean, everybody needs to have this basic level of understanding. It is for the uninitiated. It is basically, you know, Torah 101. And there's nothing wrong with it, because you can't go anywhere. You know, it's like the foundation. You can't do any kinds of higher math unless you have the multiplication tables down, the division tables down. You understand these basic processes. You can't read or write unless you learn your alphabet. So it's not, there is no judgment call on these levels, all right? It's my point. And you have to be at a level you're comfortable with according to your calling, all right? So if you're called, you know, to be an evangelist, maybe it's not so important to you to know all the deep mysteries, you know, because you got a job to do. People are living and dying every day. We got to get souls in the, okay, that's fine. But what you do not have a right to do is to denegate the other parts of the body that are called to this. This is what we have to stop doing. We have to really understand everybody has a place and a job, and we have to appreciate and accept and walk in harmony with, okay, you know, preaching again, sorry. But this is the thing that, like, if you're more Christian oriented, what you have to understand about this is, when I say literal, what I mean is, to qualify it, now I'll just say most Jewish editions of the Tanakh are published with Rashi's commentary. All right, now Rashi was a sage of the Middle Ages, one of the most brilliant Bible expositors that ever existed. All right, and he wrote a whole commentary, and it's extremely useful. It gives because the point is, you cannot interpret on a literal level outside of its Hebraic context and understanding, which is a problem what a lot of Gentile Christians have, because they've thrown the baby out with the bathwater. So what I'm saying today, a lot of people, let's just say, are starting to read the book of Jasher. Now, when I first read that, I was like, oh my gosh, how come nobody told me this stuff, taught me this? It fills in so much. It is a book of history for the upright, literally. So you read Jasher, and it fills in so many blanks about the story that we get in the first 4 chapters of Genesis. It's got tons of information, you know, about the flood, about Enoch, about Abraham, about the kings of Edom, all these different things, information that you need. Nimrod, okay. So this is what's important. I'm saying, when I say literal, you have to still interpret the verses in the context of the history that has been kept alive through the house of Judah. Okay, does that make sense? So you just can't start making stuff up. And a lot of the reasons a lot of Christian commentators allow themselves to get so liberal in their understanding is because they don't either know or they don't believe that Judah has been able to keep an accurate record, basically. All right? So that has to be really understood. And it has to be, the Peshat level has to be in line with, and much of it comes down through the understanding and with the oral Torah. All right. Now, I know the oral Torah is like the Talmud is a trigger word for a lot of people, but you need to grow up into understanding, into the mind of Yeshua, the mind of Christ on this thing, because there are many levels to the oral Torah. And one of them is, because, let me just say this, the texts were written without vowels. Okay. They didn't have vowels. So you go take all the letters out of a sentence. I mean, go and do this. Take all the vowels out of a sentence and then try to read it with understanding. You can't do it. The oral Torah was given to the scribes in a sense of where the vowel points were given so that you knew what word in context that word became. All right. So you cannot throw the baby out with the bathwater. You can't say, oh, the Torah or oral Torah is evil. There are about three very distinct, within Hebraic understanding, three very distinct levels of oral Torah. But in terms of the transmission of the text by the scribes, which is, we'll call them, the legal, the scribes, that was a whole the oral Torah of understanding where to put the vowel points, that you can't fudge on that one. You can't get rid of that part of the oral Torah. Otherwise, you just literally go try to read an Old Testament Bible that is written without any vowels in it. Good luck. It is a sealed book, let me tell you. All right. Now, so like I said, this level, Peshat level, it's praise Elohim that we have it, and that the Jews, our brother Judah, has preserved it. They're the ones who preserved it through thick and through thin, through the centuries, for us to have today. All right. Now, and included in this, you have to understand something. The New Testament, all right, not church fatherless or anything, kind of just thing with that. A lot of these letters, if you were going to include the letters of Paul, because these guys were Jewish, Nazarene, kind of sage rabbi types. All right, they weren't Christians. All right, they were Jewish 100% in their orientation. So you could be perfectly accurate in saying the New Testament is a continued running commentary on the Tanakh. Okay? Now, let's go to the Remez, because this is really interesting, because it means hint. But really and truly, what's being hinted at is so much deeper than most people, even if you understand PaRDeS, knows. So, a hint, it's something, there's something in it's alluded to it. And this is what got me going. For some reason, the Holy Spirit, and this was like, I was getting these hint levels. I'm like, what is going on here? I know that there is a veiled allusion in this text, in this verse, in these words. All right. And so I had to start searching. What was I seeing? What was the Ruach trying to, alert, like, hello, let's go deeper here. And this is where I first got into this and came upon PaRDeS and began to understand how the texts were really written. Now, but also included in this concept of the hint is so many other tools of exegesis that the sages have put into the text that most Christians are clueless about. But if you want to have truth in all of its depths, you need to get this. Because let me just say this last point, rabbit trail, that most Christians, as I say, they come into the gate, they come through the door of Yeshua, but they just stay there. They don't understand that there's this whole huge world of wisdom and understanding. All right? And so they just stop at the door. Oh, I believe in Jesus, I'm all set. Whatever. Okay, one of them is called the Gematria, which is, I think a lot of people are understanding, where every letter of the Hebrew alphabet is assigned a numerical value. And by taking a word and, taking each letter and putting its numerical value and adding them up, there are tons of ways to make comparisons to hint. So a word can hint to a relationship it has with another word that has the same gematria. Now, I'll even tell you that it's so much deeper than I even said. There is a whole, and this is what the sages can do, and this is why, in a lot of ways, unless you are fully versed in gematria, don't even try to figure out the times. This is my pet peeve. So many people today think they can figure out the day and the hour, when Yeshua is coming, or how to read the stars, and they don't even understand gematria. They don't understand the way the numbers are placed. So this in these levels in what they represent. Most people still struggle with the day of the Lord is 1,000 years. 1,000 years is a day. I mean, these relationships are absolutely established. All right, but gematria. Another one is I don't know if I'm saying this right. Notarchon. Notarikon. This is a very, again, what would be the word I'm looking for? It is a very legitimate, it's very, this is, okay, so like you're in high school, there's ways in which to deal with the letters of the text, and notarchion is like a shorthand. So in other words, you take the letters and you pull out the roots, or you do different things to it, and it gives you, it's like a shorthand way of transmitting and understanding core essences that are in the words and in the text. All right, and this is all getting through by hints. This is all in the category of the remez. There's hints, so that if you see a shorthand in the word, you can take that and you can compare it. There's all these ways of drawing, of keeping correct interpretations. Look at this as all sorts of checks and balances that are built into the text in the arrangement of the letters and the words. There's another one called the Tamara, which is a system of permutations. Okay, I'll tell you one. In Genesis, just Genesis 1:1, if you take the word Bereshit, beginning, with beginning, there are over 70 permutations in that word that give it so many deep. I did a little teaching on it. I have someone else that has an unbelievable teaching of the different, you can find out the different permutations that give that word Bereshit so much level of meaning. It'll just blow your mind. All right. So I said, nobody can pack more meaning into scripture than the Hebrews. Why do we even try to compete with them? Okay. This is also where you will begin to find the hints to the symbolic, the allegorical, there's typological, there are archetypes, there is cyclical, and there are prophetic hints in these verses that have remez hints in them. Okay, one of the ones I want to say that is so interesting is this word symbolic, the emblematic, the symbols. Now, the remez, like I told you, the Peshat was written, is a level for everybody, holy, profane, child, or sage. All right, you always need to have the literal level, and it will, just reading the Psalms will give you great comfort. There is no value system or judgment on this, but what I will tell you is, and this is where so many people today are in the remez, unpacking the remez, and they don't even know it. This is for the elites. Okay, the remez, when you're in the know, and let me tell you, both sides, this is the beginning of the transmission of esoteric understanding using exoteric symbols. All right, so and it is for the elites. And let me tell you something, the elites, as we're beginning to understand, really talk to each other through this emblematic, symbolic system that they have developed. All right. But the Hebrews, again, this is why understanding how words and how so Adam, all right, yes, Adam was a guy, was our first father, our parent. He is the first human being. But in the word Adam, this is where Paul goes when he starts talking about a first Adam and a second Adam, and you have this concept of Adam Cademan. I mean, there are so many levels of understanding packed into that word, and when it's used in verses, and it's hints, it's remezes to deeper levels of understanding. But this is where, so understanding, and this is where a lot of archetypes, all right, and understanding the cyclical, like I said, a day with the Lord is 1,000 years. You have to understand that, because a lot of these words, so it's cyclical, all right. So we have these 7 days that goes through, creates a week, but you also have it used in a hint level. As you have 7,000 years, you have 6 days of Adamic history, where we're working, so to speak. And then you have the 7th day, the millennial reign of a day of rest. That's indicator that is implicit as a hint in that understanding. So when you're looking at the verse, you have to be able to truly identify in its context. And a lot of times it will, and this is why I want to say all this, because ultimately when you're looking at verses, and I'm going to get to this, going through verses where you just, like I said, you got to be able to flip back and forth between all these levels all at the same time. These prophets are zooming in and out all the time, in my opinion. All right. So, and this is another reason why emblems, symbols, and where it gets into ensigns, all right, which is the study of flags and banners and markers, that, and this is really important understanding, like how the tribes, the northern kingdom, in my opinion, you absolutely make the case, and it's there. The hint level of that understanding is absolutely validated by understanding this remez level, this hint level, this using emblematic symbols and allegorical symbols to transmit information. Because you look at the flags over Europe, they are all coming from emblems, symbols of the 12 tribes of the northern kingdom. I mean, that's a fact. Now, that's not an accident, and that's not made up. Now, unfortunately, most people, I would say 95% of the people, except the elites, know that. So this is what I'm saying. The elites on both sides, and see, this is a lot of the war we're having today. That's why most people just will never understand what's going on in politics, because they don't understand it's a war between elites at this point, especially. And they know who each other is, and they know what's going on. And to a certain extent, I can't even get into this. Someday I'll unpack that. There is such a war going on at the level between the elites that most people, we feel, it's like the wind, you can feel it, but you don't know where it's coming from, all right? This is their kind of world and domain. Now, a lot of it, we have to get in there, we have to clean it up, we have to figure out whose emblem is whose emblem, and we have to understand that not everything that the occultists have absconded with so much of our Hebraic symbology. I mean, the Star of David just being one. People don't understand. You got to go back. You got to go deep. And if you're anti-Semitic, you'll never get there, because the spin online, the spin of the Luciferian elites is so thick. All right. So that's all I have to say on that. So into the drash, the third level of understanding. Now the drash, you get the word midrash. All right. This is again the midrash. This is the moral of the story. I mean, bottom line, there is a moral to the story, and you can never lose sight of that. So, hey, anyone who wants to be a sage, a Torah teacher, or a person, without holiness, no one will see Adonai. All right. And if you can't see Adonai, and I'm talking in the spiritual sense now, if you can't see Adonai, if you can't perceive him in your spirit, in truth, like if you're not holy, you're not going to see him spiritually. So let me put it this way. Your works righteousness is a fact. all right? You can't, this is one of the problems with the Latter-day Christian church we have, that thinks that you don't have to keep Torah, you don't have to be holy, all right? You do. Yahweh does not change, all right? Your understanding of, I'm not going to get into all that, but the drosh level, and I am not, just for anyone, I am not technically a midrash or a drosh teacher, all right? I mean, sometimes I get off in my little preaching rants, but by and large, I am really about the remez and the sud, okay? Just so you know. But the drosh is like, it's the homiletical, the interpretation. It's the moral of the story, the moral in the text that we're trying to teach us how to be pleasing, how to be holy, how to live according to the precepts and the commandments of Yahweh. So it's the law and it's its application. This is much part of what, especially in the priests and the Levites, their job, especially when it came to the ceremonial law and the temple worship, was how to do this thing, all right? And how to explain to the people, also how to get it, when they came for sacrifices and offerings, their sins, how to do this whole process of expiation, okay? Now, this is also, in Christendom, this has just kind of become all we have. See, this is the problem, Christian. You only operate 90% of the time on the sot and the drosh level. To you, because of your box, because of being cut off, your teachers cut you off from the root, you don't really even basically understand or have access to the remez or the sud levels of understanding. Now, these are paired up. So I said sot and drosh kind of go together. Hint, remez and sud, the mystical spiritual level, they go together, all right? So this is where most Christians, use the drosh level for sermons, homilies, preachings. This is the psychological level and application. This is the level of ethics. Nothing wrong with it, all right? I'm just not, that's not my forte. And there are plenty of people out there, and there's a lot of, this is one of the good sides of the Hebrew Roots movement, that it has opened people's eyes and understandings to the concept of what the law and its applications, especially for, the Gentile believers today. We're still in this discussion, but this is a lot of the level of the discussion that's going on, all right? But see, you'll never get the full picture if you're strictly Peshat and Drosh. You've got to add in the remez and the sud level understanding. That's why in a lot of cases we're not getting, people are drawing lines in the sand, like, oh, Paul's a false apostle, or Paul's everything. This lack of being able to look at scripture and be mature and understand it from all these different levels, all right? Now, let me say a last thing about this. This category is for what is called like the friends of Yahweh. So, David was a friend of Elohim. This is a point, Yeshua says, if you love me, you will obey me. Okay, friends are usually people who love each other, like each other, all right? So this is such an important, again, there's no judgment on any of these. They all are absolutely necessary. If the friends of Yahweh will stick into the moral laws and precepts, all right? Even though, and I'm not going to get into it, but this is what that level is all about, all right? And this is why, there's tons and tons and tons of commentary and midrashes, because it's a very necessary, but also kind of safe zone to stay in, all right? Now, when you get into this last level called the sud, S-O-D, sud level, it is the mystical, it is the spiritual level, all right? Now I want to say this, people, look at, Yahweh is spirit. So to me, this is the most, and I said I wouldn't give it the qualification, but important level, or a level of understanding that a lot of people are still in denial about, all right? And when you grow up into Christ, or as Paul says, you need to get the meat of the word, this is where you need to be able to go. This is where the battle is won. this is the realm. And I'll just tell you right off that this level is for the prophets. All right? Because at this level, because of what suited me, you are in the secret counsel of Yahweh. No doubt about it. All right? Even a child can understand, the 10 Commandments. A child can understand, right and wrong, basically, the do's and the don'ts in this thing, and their conscience can, they can do that. But when you get to the Sod level, this is, I've always said the PhD level, it is for people who are really able to handle the meat of the word. They need to, and this is a level that, where I said the Kabbalah and the Zohar, a lot of the mystical writings coming out of the house of Judah, this was for their sages, their trained ones who had trained their bodies and had mastered their appetites, their lusts. They had become holy, or they were holy, and they were called. All right? But we just have to grow up and understand the word. And Satan cannot originate anything. So if there is dark occultic practices that people could be labeled under dark occult, and they might use, and there is a lot of quote unquote dark Kabbalistic stuff out there, it's only because Satan can imitate, mimic, profane, distort, and get people to cross the boundaries and dabble in the hidden, forbidden magic arts. All right. So if there wasn't a real, there couldn't be a counterfeit. Now, I'm speaking, that is a fact. All right. Yahweh is the creator. So everything that's been made was made by him, and nothing has been made that was not made by him. All right. So in order for them to be a dark side, there has to have been the same level, if not higher. And of course, we know it's higher. All right. And this is the level of understanding that was passed down by the prophets. This is a level, again, as I said, of the oral Torah, where it was handed down in a word of mouth, student, mass teacher to disciple, because a lot of it has been reserved. This is what Daniel said, seal up the words until the time of the end. People, this is where we are. This is prophetic. This is where we are, all right? Because we're coming up in the battle. The sons of light and the sons of darkness, we're getting ready to square off. Yeshua's coming. Messiah ben David. There is going to be a complete showdown between the sons of light and the sons of darkness, and we're going to win. But this is the point. If you're not have some oil in your lamp on this level, you're not going to stand. You won't be able to stand. All right. So this is the mystical realm. This is the spirit. This is the otherworldly level. This is pertaining to the invisible realm. And if you don't believe that there are invisible realms with quote unquote angels and archangels and living creatures and the high, all these things, I can't help you. All right. If you think the text is myth and just sort of, superstition, I can't help you. This is in our text. This level can be understood, needs to be understood. Now, in the Greek sense, this would be the concept of gnosis and sophia, all right, which is the counterpart Greek words to the Hebraic words of chokmah and bina, wisdom and understanding, all right? We are told to get wisdom, get understanding, which is telling you to get this Sod level of understanding, all right? Now, let me give you a couple of so this is the information that has been preserved for the last days. Now, we know from reading a couple books, like if you ever read Second Ezra's, all right, which is written for a wise to a wise, okay? And it tells us there that Ezra wrote again that he wrote 94 books, and he was told 24 are for the profane. That goes in the Peshat level. They're for everybody, right? So now if you, after listening to me now, try to understand Ezra from this point of view. But he said 70 of those books are for the wise, right? Wise is a code word, like I said, get wisdom, get understanding. So these are for the people who, the leaders, the spiritual leaders and elders of the people that need this level of information, all right? If you want to be, and this is why it says it goes with the elites. This is why, Kabbalah has always been held onto by a very small group of sages. Praise Elohim, okay? First of all, it's intel. There's a lot of intense intel in here, and you don't want the enemy getting it, profaning it, destroying it for all future generations, all right? Much of Satan's warfare against the elect has always been to get at the texts and destroy them. But this is where there are secrets, all right? Because the word sod means secret, but it doesn't mean just secret. It means secret counsel. And let me flush that out a little bit more. But this is the whole point, that this level of understanding, like I said, which is for the prophets, and I don't mean just like for the prophets, but if you want to understand the prophets on this level, all right, you have to let the Ruach lead you here. And you have to be a mature enough believer. You have, and first of all, it says you always have to have mastered the first three levels, Peshat, Remez, and Drash. And you have to be able to, let me say this. Okay, so a lot of the book of Revelation today, people teach on, they think they know what it's about, but I'll tell you, it is the most Sud level book in the Bible, by far the most sealed, or the most, it's an apocalypse, I get those words. It's not apocalypse where it's hidden, all right? This is the words are highly coded. So words like the whore of Babylon, the dragon, 666, or Babylon, these are code words. These words have deep spiritual meanings, and unless you have that meaning, you cannot give its correct interpretation or understanding or application, all right? So now, let me just say I made my point about Ezra. So there are 70 books for the wise. Now this would explain to us a lot of why we find all these quote-unquote extra biblical texts from so many different streams, especially the Essenes were known. All right, let me finish making this point about the books, all right? Because everyone has always been able to read the 24 books, which really, at the time of Yeshua, was condensed into what was called the Septuagint, which was a highly prized, highly accurate, and it was done by the sages and prophets of Israel at the time. And it's an excellent transmission of the 24 books, all right, in Greek. Now, but that was for everybody. But the 70 books, this is a tradition that is in all of the other sects of Judaism at the time, except maybe the Sadducees, who, they were just the upper class. They were the infiltrated crowd. They were the ones who, the tools. What do they call that? Well, the tools of Hasatan. And it says here, this is a book from the Essene Hypothesis. It's by a scholar, very scholarly, but trying to understand these scenes, who they were, how they fit into the picture. But this is a quote. When Philo and Josephus speak of the holy texts of the Essenes, they do not limit them to Zadokite literature. And to explain that, Zadokite was the priestly literature, the true priestly literature. And you get into the Hasmonean thing and the Maccabees and what happened, okay? But I can't get into that. Philo and Josephus agree that the Essene tradition was a written tradition based on quote-unquote books, all right? We should call it the writings. Paul calls it the writings. And that the study of this literature was essential in a Essene way of life. Josephus says that they were zealous in the writings of the ancients. Now we know people read Enoch. Enoch technically, just even historically, is a patriarchal figure who lived before Abraham, lived before the flood. I mean, nobody would agree. That's a Pashat understanding that I don't think anybody would disagree with, right? So he wrote 365 books. So where did all that information, what did it morph into? All right. So what I'm saying, there is a closely had textural tradition that has gone down through the pike, through the centuries, by the holy remnant. And finally morphed into and held on to only by the house of Judah. That's why you can no longer be anti-Semitic. You have to either believe that, or in my opinion, you should just leave the table, because you're not going to be helpful in the discussion and in the restoration. So this is, Josephus says that they were zealous for these writings of the ancients, which would be, we understand, a lot of Enochian understanding, all right? And Enoch was the one who carried forward the information about the watcher angels, which is in our text, but it's a little more coded, all right? They were educated in the holy books. Philo confirms that they applied themselves with great industry to the study of the laws of the fathers, laws that no human mind could conceive without divine inspiration. Now, they were instructed in the interpretation that a learned person gave. Now, that implicit in that statement is this concept of a teacher passing on understanding to a disciple by word of mouth. This is where they get into the oral tradition. This is nothing. You just have to understand. This is a huge, and I have a whole YouTube on it. Look at it. It says, is the oral Torah one of your trigger words? All right, because you just don't throw the baby out with the bathwater until you have made a thorough Hebraic investigation of what that means. All right. So that says that whatever they say now in the interpretation, and why a lot of what's in the oral interpretation, it comes from the fact, again, this is coming down the pike from Enoch. He gave it to his sons. If you read Jasher, explains it all there. He gave it to, it passed on. Noah took a lot of the books on the ark. I've been through this whole thing before. You know, Abraham, who studied in the tents of Shem, had access to this information, all right? And this information was again passed down to Isaac, passed down to Jacob, all right? So this is, in my opinion, this is indisputable facts if you're a believer, all right? But you have to believe. But on Moshe, when you get to Moshe, again, it was given at Mount Sinai on a higher level. Because another thing I said in my last video where I was trying to explain to people, we're going up. We're going higher. Yahweh is calling us. He is calling his elect to come up higher, which means to sit with him in higher levels of understanding. He wants to pour out his Ruach. All right. But his Ruach is in all four levels. But I'll tell you, his Ruach that he wants to pour out right now, this Ruach is, as Daniel said, been sealed up, and he wants to pour it out on people. But you got to do it according to the guidelines and according to the framework of what's already established. All right? You know, it's not in Buddhist teachings. It's not in Hinduism. That's syncretic. To take those in and put, that is what is syncretic. It's not in Babylonian understandings. All right? It is in the writings, the mystical writings of the house of Judah. Okay? Now, what it says here is that they were instructed in the interpretation by a learned person. And it was a whatsoever is not easy to understand, most of the time by means of symbols, is in accordance with the ancient method of inquiry. That, I'm telling you, they're referring to PaRDeS. This is understanding that has passed down. The sages are not confused. All right, this is established. So here you have it. It is an established form of biblical exegesis, and now the Ruach is calling us into this Sud level. Now, let me make a few points on this. I hope I'm going to have to do two parts, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to take a bunch of verses, and I am going to unpack them according to this. But I have to really get all this out there, all right? But let's just go into this idea of Sud. So it says nearly all scholars agree that when used in relationship to Elohim or to Holy Scriptures, Sud refers to the heavenly divine counts, which human prophets have visited to learn divine secrets. This is the whole point of Ezekiel being called up into the heavenly throne. Ezekiel going up. A lot of these, the visions, the dreams, the level of prophecy that these prophets of the Old Testament were operating in was because they had attained this level of sod. They had attained sod level, and they were and I'm going to say, into the divine secret counsels of Elohim. Okay, so if you're in a war, obviously, Satan's not invited to these things. You don't leave it open all of heaven. The demonic dark angels can't. I'm sure they've tried to wiretap it or whatever, but it's not. These are secret counts. That's our Bible tells you that goes on. So I'm saying that level is real. Okay, so the celestial members of this council are variously called the hosts of heaven, gods or sons of Elohim. Now this is in sorry, hold on. This is in a lot of, like, it's in Psalms, it's in 1 Kings 22:19, this is Psalm 82. This is in a lot of places, the secret counsel of the Lord. All right, and this is a place where Ezekiel, they call it the Merkabah tradition, and this is a lot of levels of what is he seeing in the spiritual realms. Now, I have been over the 4 worlds, because let me tell you, when you're in the Sod level of understanding, you have left the Peshat, you have left the world of Asiyah, and you are in the world of Yetzirah and Beria. Okay, that's where these prophets were. Now, let me say this. When Paul says in the body or out of the body, there's no way, see this point, or with Enoch, what you have to understand is we can go into these places with our minds, because our minds are how do I say this? Our minds are wired to be able to transcend into the spiritual realms. All right, our bodies are not. So when a prophet, through meditation, through deep Torah study, through life of holiness, through calling, I've called you, like he says to Jeremiah, look, you are my prophet whether you like it or not. These people did go to real places, but mostly they in their consciousness was lifted up. And in future videos, I'm going to get into this whole concept of higher consciousness, or even meditation. What is going on? Because again, Satan is flooding the market with a lot of this understanding, but he's not telling you that a lot of it's, stolen again from the Jews. And he's also putting his occult dark side into it. And we need to get back up to speed. All right. There's a lot here, but let me get into this. But what you have to understand, the word sod means that this is a prophet, this is a person, and you're only invited to there. You don't just like waltz into the Holy of Holies. And that's that's the archetype. It's about these places of the divine council, the throne of Elohim. You are invited up. All right. And usually you have angelic escorts. And so let me go through a couple of these verses that talk about this and put in the sod instead of the translator. So in response to the false prophets, let's say, who prophesied victory for Judah against Babylon, and this is one of the real problems. Jeremiah kept saying, you guys are going down, and they kept listening to prophets who were keeping them, oh no, Yahweh's going to save you. Okay, so whatever. Thus says the Lord, thus says Adonai Sabaoth, do not listen to the words of these false prophets, or these prophets who prophesy to you, filling you with vain hopes. They speak visions of their own minds. This is a really important thing. Not from the mouth of Elohim. Because in this, I can't flesh out, this is where having this sud level, or having the hints, understandings, because the mind and the mouth are very specific designations. They mean things, right? Not just at a surface level, all right? But we're not going to go there. They speak visions of their own minds, not from the mouth of Elohim. They say continually to those who despise the word of Elohim, it shall be well with you. But who among them has stood in the sod of Elohim to see and hear his words? So in other words, who has actually stood? Which of these false prophecies were you really there in the room? when he prophesied and told all the heavenly hosts what's coming down? All right, Jeremiah was, and historically we know that for a fact because it played out. All right, Jeremiah 23, 21 and 22 continues. It says, I did not send these prophets, these false prophets, yet they ran. I did not speak to them, yet they prophesied. But if they had stood in my sud, because that's the word in Hebrew, if they had stood in my sud, my secret counsel, then they would have proclaimed my words to my people, and they would have turned them from the evil way and from the evil of their deeds. Jeremiah was constantly telling people, look, if you will just repent, Yahweh will be lenient. But if you harden your heart and refuse, this is what's going to happen. And this is so much today. I mean, just look at the landscape, look at the preachers, the prosperity. This is what people, a lot of the prosperity gospel, a lot of this stuff, but I'm not going to go there. You figure it out. Amos 3:7 describes the Lord's this way. Lord, so this way. For my Adonai doesn't do anything. My Yahweh, Yavhe, Vavhe, does not do anything, any word or anything without revealing his sod to his servants, the prophets, his divine counsel, his secret counsel, because they were at the meeting. All right. Finally, Job provides a description of God's sod, composed of the sons of Elohim meeting in the council. That's the famous one in Job 1-6. And in Job, there's a verse there when Eliphaz insists that Job has not sat in on the sod, the divine counsel, and that therefore cannot understand Yah's will regarding Job. And that's a fact. We know that that Job, there was a secret council, there was a meeting, let's say in heaven, between Satan and Yahweh, and it was all about Job. Oh, look at my servant Job out there, and Hasatan was given authority to plague, to torment, to throw his best at Job to see if he would curse God. And Job didn't know that whole time. He's in the dark. He's like, why did Yahweh do this to me? What did I do? All right. So if he had been in the secret council, then he would have understood, the plan, the lineup for his next 10 years of his life, whatever. All right, so these are such important things. In my opinion, we got to get up to speed on this. We have to put things in their proper Hebraic context and understand what it is to be in the council of the holy ones. All right, because I believe at the transition time, this is the point too, because people, I'm telling you what, Yahweh is going to call up some people. The 144, see how it calls, again, I want to cry, it's coming over me. We live in such unbelievable times. Things of biblical proportions are going to start happening on a dime. The chaos, I feel, the chaos is right there, and it's going to hit. And, woe to the wicked. I hope the righteous, you just hope you got enough oil in your lamp to get through. But some of us, some of you, praise Adonai, are going to be able to be literally in the secret council. And it's going to be very exciting. And they're going to do works, how does Daniel say? Some are going to do such works of righteousness that's going to shine, but exploits. All right, so this is where we are. And so I'm just going to end it. I'll come back next time with some verses, and we'll very methodically go through this. And to the best of my understanding, I will continue to try to unpack it. So, shalom, blessings. I love you. Let's just all love Adonai together, because our King David, our Messiah ben David, is coming soon and very soon.